If you're an On1 Photo Raw user and you're struggling to resize images for the competitions at the club, then I've recorded this short video to offer a little bit of help. I'm using On1 Photo Raw 2020. There is a later version, so if you're using 2021, there may be slight interface differences, but they shouldn't be too major. With competitions, you can submit portraits or you can submit landscapes, and the dimensions for each are slightly different. If you're submitting a portrait, then the longest side, in other words the height, needs to be 1200 pixels or less. If you're submitting a landscape, then the width of the image, which is the longest side, needs to be 1600 pixels or less. It's very easy to do both in On1 Photo Raw, so let's have a quick look and see how to do that. The software itself has two modes. You have browse mode, where you can go through all of your directories and folders and catalogs to find the images you want, and then there's edit mode, where you can go in and edit the picture. It doesn't matter whether you're in browse mode or edit mode, you should see this export button down at the bottom. So let's export this portrait image. Click on the export button and it brings up this sidebar on the right. At the very top we've got photo size, and the options we have are to resize the photo by width and height. So we could actually type in numbers here, but you'll see if I do that, it hasn't constrained the ratio. The width has changed but the height hasn't. So let me just reset this. The way you resize an image in On1 Photo Raw is to set the longest side or the shortest side to a specific value. Now for the club competitions, we are concerned about the longest side. The longest side for a portrait has to be 1200 or less. So if we say resize to the long edge and then change that to 1200, then we know that this picture will be resized correctly with the longest side 1200, and then the ratio will be preserved and the width will be whatever it happens to be to preserve that ratio. If we go down, we then have the resolution. I would just leave it at the default 300 for now, and if you need to play around with file sizes later, it might be something that you change. The image type I would leave on high detail, and the next option down, watermark, we can ignore. Sharpening is something that you can get On1 to do when it exports. Apply a little bit more sharpening when it's exporting, depending on what you're exporting it for. You can disable it just by clicking on that if you want to, but what I find works best for me is to do a moderate level of sharpening within the program while I'm editing the image, and then select sharpening for output and do it for the screen, because these are going to be viewed on a computer screen. Once you've exported the image, you can have a look and see, has sharpening been overdone? If it has, then just go back, uncheck that and export it again. The next couple of options we can ignore, but now we come to file type and you want to export as a JPEG and you want to select 100%. Again, if you have problems with file sizes, and you shouldn't, then you can reduce this down probably as far as 80%, but leave it on 100 for now. Under that we have the color space, and for the competition you should be saving yours as sRGB, and then the location where we're going to save it. So you can select a folder or use the current folder where the image is stored right now. After export, what do you want to do? You can show it in Explorer if you want to, or do nothing. I'll show it in Explorer because once I've exported it, I do want to have a quick check of the exported file to see whether this sharpening has been overdone. The next option down here is rename. By default your file will be called the current name, but you can change that. We can say, well, instead of current name I want to put in some text and call it whatever you want. Or what you could do is you could add, so you could say, well, call it the current name, but let's add as well the date, and then select your format for date, and you could even add another one if you wanted to, serial number, or you could put text, let's say competition, and then we're done to export. And all you need to do is click on the export button, and you can see that very quickly that image now has been exported. I can double click on it in Explorer to have a quick look in Photos, which is Windows default. Once you're in here, if you're using Windows, then I always like to go up to the three little dots and view actual size, just to see whether the detail is as good as I want it. Have a look, see whether the sharpening is okay. In this case I think it probably is, so I can leave that one. So there's the portrait exported. Let's have a go at the landscape. We're going to go back to export. This time the long edge, which is the width, we want to be 1600 or less. Leave the sharpening as it is. In fact, I'm going to leave all these as they are. Click on export, and you can see the landscape one has also been exported. If I just move my mouse over these, the portrait one is just under 1 megabyte, the landscape one is just over 1 megabyte. But let's have a double click to open it in Photos in Window, go to View Actual Size and have a look at the detail. Has it been over sharpened? No, I think that's okay. So that's how easy it is to export correct size files for the Conwy Camera Club competitions.